Hello, hello everyone. We'll let everyone join with their audio and ensure that you all can hear me okay as we are slowly getting started. Thank you for waiting in the waiting room as well. We're very excited to see so many of you here today joining us for our second session as part of the ASEFYLS 2026 webinar series on anticipatory leadership as well. So without further ado, let's get started. So an official welcome to this webinar where we'll be focusing in on systems thinking. This webinar series and today's webinar nonetheless is organized in partnership with the Copenhagen Institute for Future Studies as well as the Development Academy of the Philippines. For those of you who do not know me, my name is Linnea Regnell and I work as a senior project executive here at the Asia Europe Foundation and in our education department. And I have the pleasure of being the MC and will be guiding you through today's session and also moderating our panel discussion later. But at this stage, let me just briefly run through our agenda for today. We have 1.5 hours ahead of us. And we'll begin with contextualizing today's session a little bit, sharing a little bit about the organization, about the program, and then also, of course, the topic of anticipatory leadership. And once this is settled, we will go into our thematic part for today, focusing on systems thinking with a keynote introduction by Mr. Jared Poon. And then we'll transition into a panel discussion with a Q&A with distinguished speakers and experts who are ready to share their insights and perspectives with us on systems thinking and also the way different systems work within their context and how we can transition between different systems effectively. For the Q&A, you'll see that you have a toolbar on your screen. There you will be able to find a Q&A function. Here you can pose your questions, you can upvote each other's questions as well, and you can also reply to them and engage in discussion. You can also use the chat function, which I see many of you are already doing, to engage with one another, present yourself, share a little bit where you're from and why you are interested in anticipatory leadership. So let me just grab a little bit of water as I feel like my throat is already a little bit dry. And with that, let us set the scene a little bit on today's session. So to set the scene, as many of you know, ASEF, or the Asia Europe Foundation, is an intergovernmental organization who works to strengthen mutual understanding between Asia and Europe. And we do this across a number of different thematic areas, bringing together a variety of different governmental and civil society stakeholders to further strengthen the connectivity and opportunities for collaboration between the regions. And one of our flagship projects is the ASEF Young Leaders Summit. It's a leadership development program for young leaders across Asia and Europe to learn, to exchange, to connect with one another. And today we're here as part of the ASEFYLS Capacity Training 2026, which is part of this program. And here we have brought together 95 young leaders to be part of the program. But we're also very excited to be able to open up some of the webinars as the one today for more young leaders to join for the public. And I'm happy to see that we have about 70 participants joining us here today as well. And just to share also, of course, on the topic of anticipatory leadership for a human-centered future is very new to us, brand new as of this year. And its focus is on how we can prepare young people for the kind of leadership that is needed for a more human-centered society, and how we can use future-oriented tools to guide present-day decisions. So today's session, we aim to give you some food for thought, some inspiration, perhaps some case studies as well, and examples of how we use these tools in everyday life and in different organizations, and also spur some deeper conversations for you to be able to engage with peers in. So we brought together a group of experts to delve into this topic for you today. And with that as a contextualization for today's session, I would like to hand over the floor to our keynote presenter for today, who will continue to set the scene and share a little bit more about systems thinking as the beginning here. So allow me to just introduce Jared before I hand over the floor to him. So Dr. Jared Poon is the founder of Counterfictional, which helps organizations, reframe their internal and external narratives to build healthier, more resilient futures. It's good that I'm about to hand over the floor to Jared, because that will take a breather to speak. So operating in the intersection of philosophy, strategic foresight, and creative narrative design, he specializes in translating complex behavioral frameworks to actionable strategy. Previously, he has spent years in Singapore's public service, focusing on strategic foresight and stakeholder management and engagement. He holds a PhD in philosophy from UC Davis, where his research in metaethics and biology defended human morality within a evolutionary framework. He's also a published author, so for those of you interested in more of the fictional part of counterfictional, you can also look up his book later. He can maybe tell you more about that. It's an urban fantasy series for you to enjoy. He also has a special interest in metaphors, collaborative storytelling, games, and cats. And I think we'll have a little bit of a taste of the storytelling today in his presentation. So with that introduction, please, Jared, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Linnea. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me on. I was just reading the chat, and it's amazing the range of countries that people are coming from. It's really good to see, I think, young people like you all together here in an otherwise fragmented world. So again, thank you for having me. My name is Jared. For the next 15 or 20 minutes, I'm here to maybe say a little bit about the system and the topic for today. So let me share my slides, and we'll get into it. So give me 1 second. All right, this is a very serious sounding topic, systems thinking. I thought to start, so I'm going to have 3 acts today, right? So the next 15 minutes, I want to take you through 3 pieces. I want to tell a little story about a character named Sang Kanchil. I want to say a little bit about monsters, and then I want to end with what do we do about all this, right? So this won't be like a theory lecture because I don't know the theory really. I hope to give you a little bit more of a kind of narrative frame for this. Okay, so let's start with Sang Kanchil. This is Sang Kanchil. Some of you, I think, in the chat might know this, might know him. He's a fairly kind of famous folklore hero here in Southeast Asia. He's a mouse deer, and that's what mouse deers look like, right? They're native to this part of the world. He's a bit of a trickster hero. If you know this character, please say so in the chat. Okay, I don't know how many of you are from the region. If you know this, say so. So, Sang Kanchil. The story goes that he lives in a big jungle, right? And on one side of the jungle, you'll see that there on the right. On one side of the jungle is a lot of ripe, delicious fruit, right? On one side of the jungle, you have all the fruit you could possibly want to eat, and on the other side of the jungle, across the river, is just rocks, as you can see in the picture, right? So it's there's no food, there's barely any food, everyone's hungry, and all the food's on this other side, right? The ripe, delicious fruit. So one side of the river. Sang Kanchil, our hero, uh, needs to get to the other side. He's hungry, he hasn't eaten in a while, and he needs some food. And there is all this fruit on the other side of the river, right? The problem is there's a river. Sang Kanchil cannot swim. It's a big river, okay? It's a big, scary river. He can't swim. Also, there are crocodiles. Okay, so it's a dangerous river, right? And he's a little mouse deer. It's going to be a problem for him to get to the fruit. So what does he do? What can a little mouse deer do? What he decides to do. So he's a trickster, right? He's a clever one. He's small, he's smart. What does he do? He calls all the crocodiles. He calls all them out. He says, hey, crocodiles, come over here. Listen to me. The king of the jungle, the lion, the king of the jungle has told me, he has empowered me, Sang Kanchil, the mouse deer. He has told me that I have to count all the crocodiles in the river. My job is to count you crocodiles. So, commanded by the king, I need you all to get in line so I can count you. So the crocodiles obediently get in line, and Sang Kanchil cleverly hops and counts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 on the other side. So my animation's fantastic, by the way. I'm applying for a job at Disney, just so you know. um, but anyway, so he counts the crocodiles, he gets to the other side, but of course, counting was never the point, right? He gets to the other side, he gets to the fruit, the crocodiles are tricked, they don't get to eat any mouse deer, and they leave in shame. That's a story. So this is Sangkancho and Sangbuaya, right? This is a fairly famous story in this part of the world. What's the moral of the story? What's the lesson here? That's the entire story, right? What's the lesson here? The lesson here is traditionally the lesson is that if you're clever, if you're witty, if you're agile and nimble like Sangkancho, you can win over brute strength, right? You can cross obstacles like rivers, you can beat strong, scary things like crocodiles. That's what you can do. So the injunction is you should be smart, you should be clever, you should be nimble and witty and fast. That is what it is. But I have a slide. But maybe that's not the whole story, right? Um, Sang Kanchu is a hero, right? He's a protagonist of our story. But maybe if we looked a little bit wider, if we looked beyond our hero, right? Looked outside of our hero, outside of his hungry stomach, and we look at the system. We look at the jungle, the ecosystem, the relationships, right? The whole thing, not just our one guy, right? But the whole thing. What do we see? I want to suggest to you, my pitch to you is that this story was a disaster. This was a terrible thing all around for two reasons, for two sets of reasons. One set of reasons has to comes with the context that we started with. So the story, the way we started out the story was that, look, oops, was that there was, you might remember, a systemic resource distribution crisis, right? There was food on one side of the river and not on the other. So there was a lot of food. It was just not on the right place, right? It was all on one side, where whoever lived there by chance was very full and very happy. And on the other side was rocks and hunger, right? So that's a resource problem. That's a distribution problem. There was a crisis. Some people were going very hungry. This is not a good world, right? Not a good jungle. There was a central authority, your king, and he had no validation, no validation verification process. There was no 2FA authority process of authorization. Anyone, including a little mouse deer, could come along and pretend to be the voice of the king and tell people what to do. That's not a good system, right? Where anyone can speak with the voice of pretend to speak with the voice of authority and get obedience. There's something wrong with this jungle. And finally, we have a transit corridor, infrastructure that is terrible. Like this is a highway with full of crocodiles, right? People can't cross. They can't get to what they need to be. They can't get across the river to get the food, etc. So the jungle is already a pretty bad place, which was all kind of hidden by the fact that we were focusing on how this little protagonist so craftily solved the problem. But really, if we zoomed out, I want to suggest to you that this was not a good place. Beyond that, beyond how we started, was how we ended. Sang Kancho didn't really help things, did he? Our mouse deer, our little mouse deer, his actions had consequences. So when he did his thing, when he counted his crocodiles and decided to kind of tell them what to do and got to the other side, inequality didn't go away, right? All he did was it persisted, the inequality between the left side and right side of the river, right? That was still there, right? It was still some people very full on one side, some people very hungry on the other. He didn't solve anything. All he did was put himself on the winning side. And so now there's just more full, happy people. One more deer is very happy. And all the poor people on the other side are still hungry and sad. He weaponized misinformation, right? He told the crocodiles just a lie, right? Just a lie using the name of the king, right? So this is misinformation weaponized. And the consequence of that is, I want to say this is a big one, is potentially, and I think actually, destruction of trust. Right? The crocodiles no longer trust people now. Maybe crocodiles before this, I mean, at this point, the crocodiles were fairly gullible, right? San Kancho comes along and says, I speak for the king, and they're like, okay, we'll let you count us, we'll do what you say. That's how they started. After this incident, the next animal that comes across and needs to use the river, the crocodiles are going to say no, right? The crocodiles are like, I don't believe anybody anymore. How am I supposed to know that you speak truthfully? The next time the king has an actual thing he needs to do, the crocodiles are not going to obey, right? This is a problem. So I want to point out to you, suggest to you, pitch to you that Sang Kancho's very small, very personal, very heroic seeming actions were located in a system that was really bad, that's the left-hand side, and resulted in consequences that were potentially worse. That's the story. I'm sorry, it's a little bit depressing of a story, right? The one thing I want to point out, and I think this is an important point, is that nobody in the story is evil, right? The bad consequences, the bad context, right? The hunger, the inequality, all this well, not because anyone was evil. The crocodiles are not evil. Sankancho is not evil. The king is not evil. The fruit is not evil, right? Nobody is a bad person in the story. But somehow, all this coming together makes the world worse. The jungle is a worse place at the end of the story than it was when it started. It was already a bad place, and it becomes a worse place. So that's Act One. I just want to tell you the story because I thought to kind of reframe this very classic folklore story to kind of suggest to you that really the heroes we look at, sometimes when we focus on the heroes, we lose sight of the bigger things. So Act Two, the monsters we create. So if we zoom out from the mouse deer, sorry, okay. Systems thinking, which is the theme for today's webinar, tells us to look not at individuals, not to look at mouse deer or heroes or individual people, but the system, the monster, right? The big thing. Right? The monster in this case is not the crocodiles, right? Not the individual villains or the scary things, but the big thing, the big monster, which is the system, the structure, the organization, the culture, the relationships, the incentives, all the things that are invisible, but they're the ones that produce all the bad things you see in that story. The scarcity, right? The mistrust, the incentives, the way that things are structured, the way the jungle is structured. That's what we should be focusing on. That's the monster, right? Not the crocodiles, not Sankancho. In the real world, this is of course a story. I want to suggest to you that in our world, not the folklore world, but our world, these are monsters we build ourselves. These are monsters. These are not crocodiles, which many of us have never seen, right? These are not monsters out there. They're monsters inside us. They're monsters in our organizations, in our cultures, in our teams, in our communities. So I want to talk about three monsters in today's sharing, right? So three monsters. Monster number one, this is just kind of leading to systems thinking, okay? Monster number one is a siren. Some of you might know this monster. The siren is the creature that sings in the ocean and lures sailors to their doom, right? It like a siren, systems, all the systems that you're in. Think of your teams, think of your organizations, think of your communities, think of your friend groups. Systems have incentives. Systems create ways that that tell us where to go and what to do. Systems often don't force us. Systems that force you to do things are really not very good systems. They're not very powerful systems. The systems that really work well are the ones that don't force you. They lure you, right? They offer you things that are rational to want. Things like the system might offer you promotion if you do a certain thing. It offers you status or likes or funding or visibility for you or influence for your group, right? It offers you all these things. All you have to do is give the system this little bit. Give the system a little bit more of your time. Give the system a little bit more of your energy, or do this particular thing. Add this person to your network. Go for this event. These are all very rational things to get the things that the system says you should want. And very slowly, the siren, the system, teaches you to redefine your own values. You start off wanting something. You start off wanting to have good impact for the people you care about, wanting to help your community. And as time goes on, 20 years into your career, the system has taught you that what you should care about is the next promotion, your next raise, right? Whether your colleagues care about you, whether your boss likes what you said, whether the next PowerPoint that you're going to put together or the next deck you're going to put together is accepted by your CEO, whatever it is. It teaches you to redefine your values. No one does this. This is not a human being. This is not a bad boss. This is not a bad HR department or a villain. This is the structure of the system that's going to do this. The siren. Systems are also cyclopses. The cyclops has one eye, right? And it creates blind spots. The system has one eye. One eye means you can see one thing very clearly. The one thing that you see clearly will be whatever it measures. This will be your KPIs, your rankings, the school system. Some of you possibly are in schools, right? It will care about test scores, right? If you're applying to universities or graduate school, test scores. If you're in government, it might care about economic growth, or if you're in social media, it might care about engagement metrics. The system cares about something, and the thing is what it can measure. And it will see that thing brilliantly. It will see that thing and it will see it very, very well. And it will think that the thing is everything in the world. It will care about the one thing and nothing else. It will not care about, did you spend time with this poor person to help him, mentor him a little bit? That's not viewed by the system as anything, right? It doesn't care about whether or not you took time out of your day to do this other small thing that's not measured. There are all these things that are blind spots to the system. Again, not a person. People can pay attention to this. Your boss might think it's very good that you're mentoring your colleague, but the system doesn't care. The last one is the Minotaur. The Minotaur lives in a maze, right? And the Minotaur has an identity. He's the monster. The Minotaur is the bull-headed monster that, I don't know, attacks people, eats people. I don't know what he does. But he lives in a maze, he becomes a monster. Systems create identities. Systems will lead you slowly over time to move away from being a full person. Whoever you are, right? I'm Jared. The systems I'm in, right? I was in government for a long time, and those of you in government I relate. I very quickly stopped becoming Jared when I was a government person. I became the staff officer. I became a bureaucrat. I became a public servant. I became a middle manager. I became whatever, a civil service leader, right? These are identities that the system will put on you, that you become. And and I have some examples here. You might be the activist, the founder, the manager. The role becomes you. And again, this is not any single person. This is not anybody doing this to you. This is not a human being. This is not even an organization. This is the system. This is the structures, the incentives, the way that things are designed that makes this. And all these three monsters, I want to suggest to you, are often invisible and they are the system. They're not creatures in the system. They're not people. Again, they're not people. They're not particular SOPs. It is the system. And each of them changes something important, something you might care about, right? The siren changes what you want, right? 30 years into your career, you realize that what you wanted as a young person is no longer what you want now. The Cyclops changes what you see, right? You used to focus on, whether the person I spoke with, changed their hearts. And now you're like, did I hit my KPIs? The Minotaur changes who you are. Are you still who you are? Or have you become the worker, the employee, the public servant, the HR manager, the CTO, whatever your rank or title is, have you become that? Systems change you. And sometimes, of course, that's okay. That's not the worst thing, right? But maybe you don't want to be changed. So that's Act Two, right? Act One was a story. Act Two, I wanted to suggest to you is that systems change people. And people, not people outside you and I, right? Systems will change us. So what do we do about this? If we don't want to be changed, if we are quite, we want to hold on to who we are, right? We want to hold on to our, idealism or our values or what we care about. What do we do? Well, I don't know. I mean, to be honest, if I knew, I wouldn't be here. I'd be out there changing the system. But I wanted to give you a suggestion, right? That the system is a monstrous one. It's a monstrous system. The monsters shape people. But the reminder here is that monsters are made by people. This is not a God-given system, right? It is not actual monsters who are not human. These are made by people. They're not people, but people designed this. It's you and I, us, who made the systems, who designed the incentives, who reinforce incentives. So my suggestion is that, well, of course, that what we can do is choose how we respond to systems, right? So step one was understanding that there is such a system. And now this step is to choose how we respond, which means my pitch is that we have to be the mouse deer, but leveled up. We can't just be the mouse deer at his base level. The mouse deer, as he is a clever trickster. He survives the monsters. He's good with dealing with them, right? That's not enough. My suggestion to you is that we have to become someone who stops feeding monsters. right? We have to stop feeding monsters. How do we do this? I have three suggestions for you. Well, one suggestion with three parts. I want to suggest to you that the way to stop feeding these monsters, to stop feeding the Siren, the Cyclops, the Minotaur, is this is going to be a little bit strange. The way to stop feeding them, I think, is radical, irrational acts of virtue. I'll explain what this means. Radical, irrational acts of virtue. So one part of this, I have three parts to this. One part of this is the siren, right? Every environment you're in, I think, in school, at the workplace, maybe even in your families, every environment in your companies will pressure you to scale, to expand, to maximize your footprint. This is the thing that the world tells you is important. I think all of us are told that this is important, right? The bigger your impact, the more important the person you are, the more value you bring to the world. Expand everything, increase everything, right? That's the thing you're told to do. The rational thing is to claim every resource, expand your territory. Every piece of funding you can get, every opportunity that arises at your doorstep, every chance you get, you should be taking that and using it because the world tells you, the siren tells you, that's what you should care about. My suggestion to you, if you want to change this, we are not kings, right? If I was the king of the world, I could just tell people to change things, maybe. But we are not. We are individuals. Most of us are not that powerful. Maybe some of you are, I don't know. I'm not that powerful. So what can I or you individuals do to stop the siren? The siren that tells us this is what you should value. You should value maximization. I think one thing we can do is radical sacrifice, to choose suboptimal outcomes for yourself. To say, I don't want that. I'm told that I should get more promotions, that promotions are very important, that a bigger title and more money means I have bigger impact and a more important person. I say no. I don't want that. Someone's offering me funding to expand my footprint, but I think expanding my footprint for my organization means that I lose touch with the individuals that I care so much about. I want to work with my 12 people. I don't want to impact 6,000 people. I'm going to say no, even though that gives me a better LinkedIn profile or a better whatever, the things that the world tells us is important. I can sacrifice that and choose sub-optimization for myself so that the ecosystem can breathe, so that other people who value that, who might be better at that, who can't do anything else, have space to do this so we don't clog up the system. That's one option. I'm not saying you should do this, but to think about what you're willing to sacrifice, what the world tells you should do, and say no. The second one out of three is this is the Cyclops. Every organization, many organizations, will try to reduce you to some measurable thing. A spreadsheet, a KPI, an impact metric, something, right? We need to measure you. Otherwise it doesn't count. The rational thing to do is to game the system, right? To figure out what the measurements are and do your best to get those measurements so that you can get more funding, more promotions, more impact, more influence, blah, 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 right? Which, of course, is not a bad thing, right? More influence means you can do better things. But sometimes part of resisting the Cyclops is to say, well, I know this thing is not measured, but I'm going to do it anyway. I'm going to take time away from things that are measured and do this because I care about it, because I think it's valuable, right? Because these three people I talk to, because I'm going to spend more time with this patient, I'm going to spend more time with this customer, I'm going to spend more time at home with my kids, my family, even though it's not measured by the system, even though no one rewards me for this, even though my friends think I'm stupid, even though my co-founders think this is a dumb thing to do. I think this is immeasurable. This is what I care about. The system thinks it's zero. I think it's everything. That's integrity. That's knowing your own values and saying, that's what I want. And the final thing is that every bureaucracy, this is if you work with the government, if you work with big corporations, you will face emergencies, red tape, bottlenecks. And a smart thing to do, like Sang Kanchil, is to find a workaround, find a way to cross the river, right? For yourself and for your team, right? To get the resources that your team needs to do the work that they need. Because you're clever. All of you, I know, are leaders, you're clever, you know how to work the system, you can do this. The much harder thing to do is have the humility to say, actually, can I maybe not optimize for my own journey, for the journey of my own team, my own organization, and instead do the much harder, slower work of improving the system? What that means for Sang Kanchil is instead of coming up with a very smart piece of misinformation, telling the crocodiles what they should do, and then crossing and eating all the fruits, instead of doing this, doing the very slow, very unrewarding work of building a bridge, getting people to come together and build a bridge so that now everyone can cross. Building a bridge for people you'll never meet, who will never thank you, who will never give you anything, any kind of status or reward or fame or affirmation, but building for them anyway. That's humility. Okay, so that's my last slide is to, I know this is a little bit of a broad kind of hand waving at systems thinking. Here's what I'm leaving you with. Not any kind of particular theory or framework. I want to kind of suggest to you that this mode of thinking, systems thinking, is to think beyond the local, to think beyond not just yourself, but think beyond your team, think beyond your organization, beyond your country even, right? And to think of the broader, often monstrous structures that shape people, issues, things. And you need to do this because you have to understand the monsters. You have to know how the siren is, how the cyclops is, how the minotaur is. And once you understand them, then you can do this very radical acts of resistance of saying, no, I don't want to listen to the siren. I don't care about the minotaur. I'm going to do this anyway. And that's when we do this, when a few of us do this, when many of us do this, that's what transforms the system. Thank you very much. I hope this made some kind of sense. I'll pass the time back to Linnea.
Thank you very much, Jared. And let's see. Let's zoom in here. Thank you very much, Jared, for that presentation and for leaving us with those, I think, words of wisdom and encouragements as well for us how to maybe start reframing our minds a little bit. We last week focused on anticipatory leadership mindset. So I think that this also builds on that. How can we start thinking broader and perhaps maybe not the most conventional way or the way that is being pushed for us, but start looking at the bigger pictures and other approaches as well. So really appreciate this. Thank you for sharing and for starting us off with this keynote presentation. We're now going to keep you around and we're going to introduce our other speakers to join us for the panel discussion of today's session. But before I do that, I just wanted to share a little bit about how we brought together this panel. So, of course, at ASEF, we always strive to ensure that perspectives in our programs and in our panels are from both Asia and Europe. And we also consider a number of different factors, which includes also gender balance. And unfortunately, on this occasion, we face a slight challenge in this aspect. We have a panel today with three gentlemen who are all experts in their own fields and bring a lot of very important perspectives to the conversation. But due to some last-minute scheduling challenges, we were not able to bring in our female panelists as we planned. And we want to acknowledge that this panel does not reflect the gender diversity that we usually strive for in the organization. But we appreciate everyone's understanding on this, and we remain committed to ensuring that we have a balanced view of perspectives, including gender balance, in future sessions as well. So with that acknowledgement, I would like to introduce to you our speakers that we have with us today. So of course, we have Jared joining us also to continue the conversations from his panel keynote presentation. But I would also at this stage like to introduce to you Dr. Ebenezer Florano, who is a full-time professor at the University of Philippines. He has a PhD in public administration from the International Christian University in Japan and an MA in international relations from the International University of Japan as well. He obtained his Master's of Public Administration and BA in Public Administration from the University of Philippines. And before his current role, he's also previously been a director of the Center for Policy and Executive Development of the UPNZ PAG from 2013 to 2019. And across his career, he's lectured, he's provided many lectures and different training programs on policy analysis, project development, and management to both officials and staff, mostly, almost all from government agencies and local government units. So he's bringing in this perspectives to our conversations as well. So in addition to this, he's also a member of numerous different panels and organizations, including the International and Local Academic and Professional Organizations. And he's also, beyond his engagement in the Philippines, his academic background in Japan, he's also been a research fellow of the Taiwan Ministry of Foreign Affairs, based at the National University of Kaohsiung in Taiwan. So with that, thank you very much, Ebenezer Florano, for joining us today. Very excited for your perspectives. And then our third and final speaker that we have joining us today is Mr. Victor Josa, who holds an American Bachelor's of Science degree in Political Science from McDaniel College and a Master of Science in Global Environment Governance from Vrije University in Amsterdam. He has worked in research and policy roles within the World Health Organization and also been actively engaged in the United Nations climate policy process for over a decade. His contributions has focused mainly on connecting policymaking with education and ensuring that youth involvement and engagement, as well as scientific literacy and public understanding, remain central pillars of international climate actions. And this brings us to his current work, where as an educator and science communicator, he develops and applies interactive science-based learning tools that help diverse audiences understand climate risks, policy dynamics, and pathways for action. So today he's mainly focused and does this work from his home in Central Europe, but he's also committed, of course, to advancing climate literacy across the regions and fostering evidence-based decision-making and strengthening the capacity of communities and institutions to respond to climate change and public health impacts. Thank you very much, Victor, for joining us today. And to set the scene and to continue on Jared's introduction, I would like us to open up the floor to our two additional speakers to share a little bit about their work, to comment also, of course, on the presentation and share maybe a little bit on your perspectives on systems thinking and how you defined it, as well as any practical knowledge that you can share with our participants today. Because of course we work a lot with theory, but of course bridging the two is an important factor. So perhaps Dr. Ebenezer Fulano, I can invite you to share first on this question.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you very well.
Okay, so thank you very much first and foremost for the invitation. So I was just invited to give comments and I don't have PowerPoint presentation. As I was introduced by Linnea, I am into really more of public administration and public policy. And I view systems in a more macro scale, developmental scale, because that has been part of my work. And I view systems as composed of several subsystems working together, hopefully harmoniously, so to be able to achieve societal goals and objectives. So I use systems thinking in my work teaching and training of government officials, personnel, in crafting public policies, developmental projects. So that's how I view systems. Okay, so it's more for creation of a public value that will enable to help the country move forward or to deal with crisis. So right now, we are in a stage called VUCA. We are in a world that is defined as vulnerable. There's so much uncertainty, complexity, and anxiety. Okay, so there could be, well, you could call it chaos, and this could bring about polycrisis. Polycrises are entangled crises together. Okay, so it makes it difficult for countries to move forward if there is no systems thinking and there is no anticipatory leadership. I think that's also the key words. Anticipatory leadership and also systems thinking. So it would help a country if people are using systems thinking, and there are leaders who are using that kind of anticipatory leadership. Anticipatory leadership is that before bad things happen, you should be able to detect them and make some precautionary preventive actions so that the bad things will no longer happen. But before you can do that, you must have a wider perspective of things. Okay, that's systems thinking. And that means you're able to connect all the dots. Okay, the kind of thinking that we have, especially during the industrial period, is that you can box everything. Okay, there is a box for man-made activities, and there's a box for nature, and that we have already seen as that's something false. That's a false dichotomy. You have to have a systems thinking. Okay, the many crises that we are facing right now or experiencing right now is because we tend to separate things, okay, and box them into nice little squares, okay, and that produces problems. So we need to have a systems thinking, and once we know how things work, and if we can already see, I think another keyword is futures thinking, that this will produce something bad in the future. We don't let these bad things happen. We anticipate it, and we make preventive actions. You can cut me off if there's a need, okay? So, for example, I am involved in a project as a consultant about dengue. Okay, before the season of dengue comes in, we need leaders who are able to anticipate when it will occur. For example, in the Philippines, if it's already rainy, you don't have to wait for the rainy season to happen. Okay? Because this area is prone, for example, to dengue, you should be able to come up with measures that would stop, mosquitoes, okay, from breeding in, for example, rivers or in stagnant waters. Okay, so it's kind of really looking at things in a systems level. You have a foresight. You will know what will happen, and because you will know what will happen, you should exercise anticipatory leadership to prevent it from happening. So that's how I see the relationships among systems thinking, anticipatory leadership, and futures thinking.
Thank you very much for that. And I think echoing also what Jared mentioned on that the system is just not isolated. It could connect to so many different parts, and to being mindful of these as well is really important. Thank you for those introductory remarks. Victor, would you like to add here?
Absolutely. Thank you, Lina, and hello to all of you. I'm talking to you from Budapest, Hungary, from Central Europe, where, as kindly introduced by Linnea, I work for the Proteus Foundation most of my time doing education in the field of climate solutions, climate action. And when it comes to the experience and the perspective I got about my field, climate action, increasing climate risk literacy, and how systems work, I probably got the difficult way or the difficult path, given my background, that I started off working in large systems such as the United Nations system, specifically on climate and health processes, getting, you could say, the bureaucratic aspect, the bureaucratic part of how these decision-making systems work. And only later, after getting that perspective, I started to become a market practitioner, working for smaller companies, working for startups, coming up with innovative solutions to the climate problem. Right now, I also work as a business developer for a forestry company called Silvanus Forestry, based here in Hungary, where knowing these systems, I'm talking about, for example, forestry subsidies, national forestry subsidies, working with the national governments, following their regulations on how to plant, what to plant, talking about adhering to carbon market standards for carbon verification. And then at the end of the day, working with landowners who are actually planting the kind of trees that we're selling as a company. So all these things have such an interconnectedness when you want to apply things. But building on Jared's keynote and really the message, the narrative, the story that Jared shared, really the world is not broken because people are stupid, careless, evil. People are just making rational decisions inside systems, right? That have these unintended consequences, as we learned in the forest. And I think that is a very important starting point, especially for climate policy. I have to add that blaming people can be emotionally powerful. It can bring people together. It can even create urgency. And sometimes that emotional energy is useful, but as a way of solving complex problems, blame is probably not enough. Finding villains, we may miss the structure that keeps producing the outcomes again and again. So if you really want to blame something, perhaps the better target is not only the individual actor, but really the rules, the incentives, the pressures. So in simpler words, I guess you would say, don't hate the players, hate the game, right? And climate change is a very good example of that. Most people are not using fossil fuels because they want to damage the planet or want to create harm. They use them because the current system makes fossil energy available, affordable. It's familiar, right? We already know it. And it's very deeply embedded in how we live, work, travel, produce things, etc., etc. So the systems thinking question is not only who is responsible, but it's also what incentives are people responding to? What choices does the system make easy for you or for the given actor? What choices does it make difficult at the same time? And where can we change the rules of the game so that better choices actually become the normal choices? And this is exactly what we see in the world of climate action, climate policy. Climate change is, as you know, it's really not just an environmental problem. It's an energy problem. It's an economic problem. It's a social problem. It's a public health problem. And as we know, it is a political problem. So we change one part of the system, many other parts also move. And that's the same way if we tax fossil fuels, emissions may go down. But at the same time, taxing makes energy prices go up. Households, businesses will feel the pressure. And if people feel pressure, you have the political support that behind it may weaken at the same time. So what I would like to show you and maybe help you visualize a little bit better is I brought a tool with me, a climate policy tool that I want to share on screen. And here I'm asking Linnea and the other speakers at what point we can bring that in using a screen share.
You can share it now if you wish.
All right, asking for the screen share.
You should be able to share using the toolbar as a.
Here we go. Please confirm. Can you see my screen?
Yes, we can see it.
So what you see here is the En-ROADS climate simulator. And it's a simulator that was developed by an MIT project in in Boston, Massachusetts, in the United States. And by the way, it's a free tool. It's an open source, open access tool that anyone can use under the URL that you see here in my browser. And this tool lets you test different climate solutions, such as taxing, such as subsidizing energy sources, to all sorts of other environmental actions, and see their impacts, see their outcomes. It's important to mention that this tool is based on the best available science. So it's being constantly updated every 3 to 5 months. I see some updates in there. It's based on UN IPCC findings, International Energy Agency findings, etc., etc. You could all look it up. And so I'd like to visualize what I just brought in with, for example, energy use. And we often say, why don't we just get rid of the fossil fuels that we have in our system? Because I already identified that consumption and the use, the burning of fossil fuels is the primary driver of temperatures and climate change. I have all these different energy areas. You see coal, you see oil, you see natural gas here on the left side, whereas you also have a group such as renewable energy, nuclear energy, etc., etc., etc. So we've already learned that renewable energy is the way to go if we want to produce clean energy, right? Use solar panels using the sun's energy, use wind turbines to generate energy from wind, geothermal, hydro, where we're using water. These are all no carbon or very, very, very low carbon energy sources. So let's say that on a global scale, because this simulator shows you global measures, accounting the whole world. Let's say that on a global measure scale, we would subsidize renewable energy. And here I'm just going to use simple settings. I will adjust this lever, pull it to the right side, and say, we just highly encouraged renewable energy around the world. I have this replay button here that I will use, and I want to ask you to pay close attention to what's happening on the screen. On the right side of the screen, you see this number, this blue number, plus 3.2 degrees scenarios. If you have heard about the Paris Climate Agreement before, you might have heard about the global climate goals, right? We have a global climate goal in place to achieve a 2-degree climate scenario, 2-degree world, which the UN and which the scientific world says is a safe pathway to well, not reverse, but to hold climate change. And right now, we just applied a lot of renewables. I want to take a look here in this graph, which shows you the global sources of primary energy. It's basically our global energy mix. You see, it's a very colorful graph showing you all the different sources of energy, from coal to oil to gas to renewables, even nuclear and bioenergy. And what they would just do, we just added some renewables into the system. We already had a good amount in there, but we just added more. And I'm asking you, if you look at this number, the temperature, did it really help us? Did we get closer to our 2-degree world? Oh, we did, because we just jumped right from 3.3 to 3.2 degree scenarios, but it's not a lot. And at the same time, we spent a lot of money on supporting renewable energy. However, the climate has not improved. But let's see, let's look at it from a different angle. What if we would look at the average price of energy to consumers, which is, again, it's another aspect. We basically just made energy, or at least one source of energy, we just made it cheaper. It's marginal, it's not a lot, but we created co-benefits. We just made global energy cheaper, and we just achieved some climate benefits. And I'm not even talking about the effect that it may have on fossil fuels. I want to show you another, maybe a stronger example. What if we would start getting rid of other sources, the dirty sources? I'm talking about fossil fuels. Let's start with oil. We use oil mostly for transportation. So let's say we want to electrify our fleet, our transportation fleet, basically put more electric vehicles on the road. I'm just going to highly encourage electrified transportation. Did we achieve those goals that, for example, car companies tell us, or sometimes when we hear about new policies, new local governmental policies, for example, local governments banning internal combustion engines from city centers? We would think it may have a big effect on the climate. But if you look at it on a global scale, we see it's not delivering. But then let's think about other perspectives, such as the air quality in a given city certainly is impacted by less car fumes. Let's think about traffic. Let's think about how we share the space when it comes to parking places, when it comes to spaces on roads.
Yes, Victor,
Okay.
I think it's a very good example, and also great to have this visual aid for us to see just the impact of these different micro changes that and how they affect the global system. Thank you very much for sharing. I would like to perhaps open up the discussion more also on how we can look at the different aspects of systems and how do we understand the interlinks between small systems and the global system. So I would like to perhaps come back to Jared, and also feel free to comment on anything that the other speakers have brought up so far. But when we're talking to the young leaders here in the call today, they may be at various different levels within their organizations. They're in different systems, both in their countries and regionally as well. Perhaps, do you have any words of wisdom or guidance on how one can go about? Don't shake your head immediately when I finish, but if you have any suggestions on how one can go about mapping this system and understanding it in a way that you can be more conscious in the way that you're interacting it, because both you and Jared and I, also Ebenezer, mentioned how there are many different incentives coming from many different directions. So how are we mindful of where they're coming from and how we engage with them?
That's at me, is that right?
Yes.
No, sorry for shaking my head at words of wisdom, because I really don't have any more wisdom than anybody here. But if I really loved, I think what Victor and Melissa showed, right? The tool is amazing, Victor. I'm gonna play with it after this. I think it's awesome. The question was how I think about mapping systems. Is that right? That we behave in. I suspect Ebenezer and Victor would have the kind of bigger picture about kind of global, bigger systems. I will talk maybe a little bit about the smaller systems that I work on. So I work quite locally here in Singapore with the kind of government systems here and the maybe a little bit of regional work. I think the temptation often is to think of systems as the actors, right? You map the stakeholders, right? You think about the ministries and the agencies and the personalities, right? And you think, why is this organization not cooperating with these people? Why are they not funding this group? Why are they fighting like this? And you think, oh, it's because this CEO doesn't like this permanent secretary and they are not friends and so on, right? We want to talk about I think the human brain is very naturally attracted to stories about heroes and villains and people and drama and reality TV, right? We want that in the systems that we see. So we think of stakeholders, right? And even when stakeholders are organizations, when we think of the Ministry of X and the Ministry of Y, we think of those almost as personalities, right? And how they come in conflict. I suspect that that's a seductive way to think about this, and that's not wrong or bad. I suspect a nice layer to add to this is to think, in addition to personalities and actors and so on, to think of what all of us have been talking about here, right? Incentives and structures and relationships, all the invisible things, right? The things that are part of the system, not any individual, but the way that things are designed, the way that things have been built or grown or accreted, right? To me, I guess I like carrots more than sticks, so I tend to think a lot just naturally about incentives. When I look at systems, I find myself very drawn to thinking to being very curious about like why are these people behaving that way? Like what is drawing them that way? I saw a question in the chat about corruption, right? And about sometimes we see corrupt leaders and we think, those are bad people. And in some cases, they might be, right? I'm not saying no, some bad people are, there are bad people. But I think oftentimes my suspicion that things like corruption, things like incompetence, things like lack of cooperation or whatever it is are results of incentive structures, right? The way that the culture or, it could be things like roles as I'm a father or I'm a particular gender roles or parental roles or systemic roles like I'm the CEO, I'm the CTO. This is what I have to do. This is what I'm supposed to do, protect my team, etc. Right? Those incentives I think are more powerful when you want to map a system than looking at the actors, I think.
Oh, thank you very much. And thank you also for addressing one of the questions. Yeah, I think the point on that was also brought up a couple of times already on not blaming the individuals, but looking at the systems and how we can go about navigating them is really important. I would like to invite Dr. Ebenezer to build on this, perhaps then more from the government side and the policy side, how we go about understanding the systems, and also perhaps to build on that when there are incentives from multiple directions, as said, how do we go about responding to them? So Jared mentioned in his presentation that we choose how we respond to the systems around us. So perhaps you would like to comment on this as well.
Oh, is it me?
Yes, Dr.
Okay. Can I share one website? I already posted the website address, so let me just
Yes.
share this with you.
Feel free.
So perhaps this could answer your question. So a while ago, I was talking about theories, systems, anticipatory leadership, futures thinking. And we are talking about the role of young people. So let me just introduce to you a human face. This is a young lady from the Philippines. At the time, she was 17 years old. And she was, I think, fed up with the reactive leadership of the local government. When there's rain, there are no prior information whether there's going to be classes to be held. Okay, and along the way, if there is no announcement, students will have to cross streets flooded, okay, flooded with rainwater. So what the student did on her own, she took the initiative to create this Baha Brigada, or in English that means flood brigade. With her friends, she created using GIS, using data from elevation, river distance, population, the population density to predict what would happen if so much amount of rain would fall in their locality, in their local government. And so, to make the story short, she was successful using these maps, using GIS. Okay. And then she went to the mayor, and the mayor accepted the proposal, and they are now, I think, using it. And according to the last sentence, she wants to adapt the map and for the world to use it. So what is the story here? Even though the system is broken, you can use systems thinking to fix it. Okay? And so and also this is a story of a young person. I think you can relate. You don't have to be a government official, okay, to be able to make some changes in your locality. All you have to do is your concern. There should be a concern. In our VUCA world, in a polycrisis society, there are a lots to be concerned with. You know, young people, they have so many problems like mental health, climate change, their education, their employment. There are so many problems. Okay, so you need just to be concerned. You need to have a goal. Okay, and for you to be able to fix, the system, you have to be truthful. You need to have evidence, and you have to work with so many stakeholders. And probably last, you must know the policy making processes in your locality. Okay, so you are young. Okay, you are passionate. Okay, and you can do something even though you are not in a position. Okay, so you can have systems thinking. You can have anticipatory leadership, and you can have futures thinking. That would be just my message. So you just read the story of Ariana Isabel Panganiban. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ebenezer. And yes, the link has been shared already in the chat for people who are interested, so can read more about the initiative and her story as well. Thank you very much. At this stage, let me bring in some questions from our audience. And we have a couple that are directed to specific speakers, but I would also like to open up the floor to anyone who is interested in addressing them to take the floor. So we have one question first from Alice from Australia, who shares that anticipatory leadership asks us to act on futures that we cannot fully see. But in public administration, accountability often flows backwards, so referring to past decisions, mandates, and promises that have been made. So how can we resolve this tension of either, in her words, paralyzing the bureaucrat or letting the futurists off the hook? So who is responsible here for shaping the world as we see it? I think this is a very interesting question. So I would like to open the floor to any one of our speakers who would like to attempt to answer this question.
Well, in international law, there are two principles. It's either, I forgot which one. It's preventive and precautionary principle. That means you must act now, even though you have incomplete information, because we are sure that the damage could be irreversible. So it's either the precautionary or preventive principle. Now, in developmental planning, sometimes you don't need the complete information. Sometimes, there's what we call in abductive reasoning. You come up with solutions even though your information are not complete. So this is different from inductive and deductive reasoning. The word is abductive reasoning. So provide solution even though it's incomplete. The information are incomplete.
Thank you. So we need to be proactive here and think more preventatively for the future. So in that sense, the futurist is a little bit responsible for thinking in these patterns, but also then looking at the structures that we're working in. Jared or Victor would like to comment on this or build on? If not, we can, yes, Jared?
Sure, I'll jump in with a quick story. I'm not sure this answers the question, but it's a really good question, and maybe I don't know how to answer it. But I recall maybe one way to do this, I thought as an ex-bureaucrat, is to maybe spread that accountability out a little bit, so your boss is part of this. I guess it's the strategy I've taken. So I used to be a futurist, and I remember one project where I was tasked to do something that I thought that was a risky move we could make. I can't tell you what it is, right? But it was a risky move we could make and was fairly expensive, right? Money-wise. So I talked to my boss, actually my boss's boss's boss, right? So I went all the way up and I told her, look, I want to try this. I think it has some chance of working. If it works, it will be big. It's likely to fail. Are you okay? Like, are we okay to spend this money to try this thing that I'm happy to push, but chances are good it will fail, right? And she said yes. right? So this was me being a futurist, kind of plotting out possible ways that the future could go, thinking this is one move we could make, anticipating failure, right? But kind of risking the gamble, bringing your boss in. It failed. It did not go anywhere. This project, this is not a happy ending, but it was okay, right? Because I guess accountability flowed in a way that I guess it was kind of pre-spread or pre-structured, so everybody was okay with this, that we had understood the risk and decided that was a risk that we as an organization, my boss's boss's boss, was willing to take. So I guess that's one way that I guess a bureaucrat can work within the system to marry those two things. But good question. I wish I had a better answer.
Thank you. We got a comment from Alice saying also it was okay not to answer it perfectly in that sense. I think it's more to open these discussions as well. Victor, you're not currently unmuting yourself, so I will see maybe if we have another question that you would like to address. So continue with a question from Ivan from Europe as well. So we're going a little bit to see from different perspective also from Asia and Europe. So he's asking specifically what examples of challenges that our speakers or you could share for radical rational solution for non-measurable objectives, point two. So I think related to Jared, your presentation here, and thinking also long-term for the whole group and other people, so not just our team. So how can we, I guess, balance the non-measurable objectives, so the things that we kind of want to be working with, and then also those that are perhaps more measurable as well. Tricky one.
Yes, it's a tricky question. These are all very good questions. I'm pausing because I don't have good answers. But again, I have no framework to offer or no like solution to offer here. One, I remember I had a colleague who was very good at, not very good, he was very willing to tell the boss off. And I worked in the single public service, which is not that kind of place where you do that, right? I guess most public services aren't, but ours especially, among others, it's not. It's a pretty hierarchical place, right? I had one colleague, fresh new graduate, so young officer, who was very happy to tell the bosses they were doing dumb things or when they were wrong or when disagreed with them. And this was horrifying to the rest of us, right? But I thought that was to me, and I love this guy. This guy is amazing. I'm still friends with him. I admire him greatly. He's still in the public service. And I think part of the power of this, I think, is that this was, to me, radical virtue. This was somebody willing to make the sacrifice to take on the burden because he gets nothing out of this. The bosses hate it, right? Right? No one, he doesn't get anything out of this, but the system does. Everybody else does. The boss, this is the only person willing to tell the boss that they're wrong or they're stupid or they're whatever, right? And that's a big risk taken by yourself. You're privatizing the risk and spreading the benefit, which is opposite of what rationality tells you to do. And I think this is a brave thing. This is radical virtue. And in my mind, this is a kind of example of how you might do this thing, right? In a practical way.
Yeah. I think we all need these advocates in every system. I think all of them have them. So not only do we have these monsters around us, but we also have these silent advocates as well, or loudly advocating for certain parts where equally as important. Perhaps I'll address the question to you, Victor. We have one specifically related also to the climate change. So a question from Tuka from Myanmar, who is asking, related to Europe's current extreme heat wave, if there is a way that we can use systems thinking and anticipatory leadership to help policymakers and communities to address both immediate impacts, but also long-term challenges.
Yes. So when it comes to systems thinking in the relation to heat waves, right? As we are speaking, outside in Budapest, it's about, I think today is 36 degrees Celsius. And it's been going on since a few days by now, but if I look at the forecast, it's gonna go on for the next 2 weeks, or at least as long as my iPhone is giving me weather forecast data. So it's not only, heat wave is not only a weather event. It really affects public health. It affects energy demand, water systems, agriculture, even labor, how productive people are when it comes to work and vulnerable communities. The other day, I heard from a friend of mine who works as a young doctor in a hospital that just on the first 2 days of the starting heat wave, the number of mortality has increased pretty significantly when it comes to heat stress, when it comes to strokes, when it comes to cardiovascular diseases. So the immediate response is basically warning systems, cooling centers, the outreach, especially when we take the example of health, public health outreach, protecting workers, and the support for those people, those communities affected in this case, talking about elderly, we also talk about low-income people with certain infrastructure. But leadership really asks things such as how do we redesign a system before the next heat wave arrives? That would be the correct question. That means greener cities, better building standards, that is more climate resilient when it comes to infrastructure, energy plan, emergency planning, and obviously policies that reduce emissions. And then we go back to the things we tested in the simulator. So the key is to treat heat waves not as something isolated, not as isolated crisis, but as really these are the signals of a need for a changing system.
Thank you very much, Victor. And I think great answer to this. And we also think, Tugay also thanks for the answer to his question as well. And I think you touch upon a thing that leads me into the next question, and that we also received, and open up again the floor to anyone who wished to answer it. But from Kitisia, who asks, in relation to problem solving, we often go about doing so in a very siloed approach. Perhaps as we're looking at one ministry wanting to do a certain approach, but on an NGO level, they're doing another approach, and wherever it may be, or even between different ministries within the same government, to fixing an issue. And therefore, one thing might be solved in one place, but we create bottlenecks in other places. So they're asking here whether or not we can use systems thinking here, and also then causal loops and how everything comes together, how we can encourage or perhaps approach this in a way that allows for teams to zoom out, see the bigger picture, and they're also seeing the ripple effects of these decisions that they have, not only within their organization, but then also across. So yeah, any speaker who would like to take the floor here? Perhaps Ebenezer, do you want to reply first?
Well, it's hard to answer the question because it's general, and I might not be able to give the right answer. But the answer is already in the question. The answer is already in the question. Get out of the silo. Get out of the ivory tower. Talk to each other. Make the communications devices interoperable. So get out of the silo. That's a simplistic general way. But if you are able to give us more specifics, perhaps the answer could also be specific.
Perhaps it also depends on, of course, which topic or challenge that we're trying to solve here as well, and,
yes,
and what approach it is there. I think the question is more general, so perhaps Jared, I see you unmute yourself. You want to reply?
I wanted to build on Ebenezer's point. I thought it's exactly right. Kind of getting out of the ivory tower, right? And I think this is true not for governments, but also everybody, right? Has our little bubbles that we're in. In my mind, the tempting way to solve this problem of teams not being too siloed, not collaborating enough, the tempting thing is to teach them stuff. It's the intellectual direction, right? To give them frameworks, explain systems thinking, give them bullet points on a slide about how important it is, right? I suspect that does nothing for anybody, right? There are a very small number of people who are like, yes, I get it now. I will now think in systems, right? I feel that doesn't do anything for most people. For most people, I suspect it's exactly what Ebenezer says, to get out of the tower, right? I think the way to build that collaboration across groups is to create systems, right? To create networks of people, to create the kind of structures of lunch groups and communities of practice or whatever it is, where people can talk to each other. And I think when you know somebody across the aisle from you, across the ministry, across the NGO barrier, when you next work on your next app or next policy or whatever it is, quite naturally, it's much easier for them to come to your mind and say, how will this impact my friend over there? Right? I just had lunch with them and they were just talking about how difficult it was for them to live in Europe right now because of the heat wave, right? If I do this thing, this policy, it might hurt my friend. That's a much more effective way, I think, knowing the people outside ivory tower than some set of frameworks or some set of bullet points.
Yeah, very important thing to mention here. And I think the red thread perhaps is to build trust also in between different between people, between institutions, and also between countries. Of course, we at ASEF work a lot with the country level, but also people to people level as well. And I think we have this this value of trust as an underlying theme throughout our projects. And of course, our participants who are joining us here today will know that we also talk a lot about this, not only intercultural understanding, but also understanding between different sectors and between different people. So I want to highlight this as well as a very important incentive, because when we're talking about systems, we know that a system does not work with one individual, but it all affects everyone together. So thank you for this reply. We're coming towards the end of our time here today. So before we wrap up, I would like to invite our speakers again to share any final reflections and thoughts or message to our participants joining us today. So we talked about systems, the different monsters that exist in it, perhaps that the system is not, the monsters are not the people itself, but how we work around it. So yeah, I would like to invite you all to share final reflections, just a minute or so, with our participants before we sign off. Perhaps then I'll invite on my screen the way back. So Victor, would you like to give your closing remarks?
Yes. So I think when it comes to my message, the main lesson I want to leave you with, or I want to leave with, is systems thinking will probably not give us a perfect solution or answer. But one thing it certainly does, it helps us ask better questions. And for leaders, that is key, because leadership in complex systems is not only about acting quickly, it's also about understanding the wider system good enough or well enough to act wisely. And whether we work on climate, whether that's education, public health, governance, development, the challenge is similar. Can we move beyond isolated problems? Can we see the relationships behind them, between them? Can we understand the incentives that shape behavior? For me, the real value of systems thinking is, can we really, as actors, as players of the game, can we find leverage points where our actions create these lasting changes?
Thank you very much, Victor, for those final remarks. Dr. Ebenezer, would you like to deliver yours?
Okay, so I've said a lot already about the systems. We use systems so that we can have a better world. But right now we are in the age of artificial intelligence. We might have to use our leverage, big data analytics, data science, artificial intelligence, so that we can come up with faster policies, plans, and even a better system. It's already a thing of the past when we make decisions that are so cumbersome because we cannot find data. Okay, the data are now everywhere. We just need to harness them. And because of data, whether quantitative or qualitative, we can make better systems. We can predict better in the future. I'm saying that because I'm also wearing a hat as a convener of the data science for public policy program. So better system means evidence based, and the pieces of evidence are already out there. So we just need to harness them with the use of today's technology. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ebenezer. And I think already teasing perhaps some of our coming webinars on more futures thinking tools, as well as also our approach later on technology and futures thinking as well, and how AI and new technologies are influencing these as well. So perhaps a little teaser in mind. And then, Jared, would you like to deliver your closing remarks, starting us off with your keynote and ending the final points?
Thank you so much. No, but thank you everybody, panelists and ASEF and all of you who are here spending your hour and a half, 2 hours with us. Closing thoughts for me. I think that systems thinking can be very depressing, right? That when you start kind of really getting into it, seeing the monster, right? And realizing for many of us how helpless we are before it, right? Can be an awful feeling, right? I think Ebenezer has talked about how VUCA the world is, and it is, right? And it can be horrifying to, especially to young people like you, when it's like, what can we possibly do, right? In a world like that's so large and so monstrous and so powerful. I want to suggest to you, and this is touching a little bit on what Victor said, that systems thinking is also the solution to this, right? That the system is the problem, the monsters are the problem, but I think there are two ways to redeem the monster. One way that I think is harder than people think. One way is to work with the monster, right? To join this big organization, to be part of the structure, to be part of the system. And at some point later in your career, when you're strong and powerful and part of the monster, you can steer it, right? That's the hope. That's harder than I think most of us expect, right? Because by that time, 20 years in your career, you are part of the system, you're part of the monster. No one can resist that call, right? That's hard. But if you can do it, do that. The other path, which I think is easier than we expect, I think, is to resist the monster. Is to say, I'm not going to care about X and Y and Z that the monster tells me to do, right? I'm going to do things this way. I'm going to try this thing. Which many of you are doing, right? This is your entrepreneurship path. This is your founder's journey. This is giving up on all the things that society tells you to care about and saying, I care about this instead, right? That I suspect, and then changing the system that way. I suspect that's actually easier than we think it is in this VUCA world, especially when there are opportunities like this. So again, strong encouragement. I hope you all do well. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you very much, Jared. So perhaps leaving with the fact that systems are scary, but they are easy to navigate if you put your mind to it and work around it. And I would like to also include here a quote that was shared by one of our participants in the chat as well, that we work in the system, against the system, and for the system at the same time, which I think is a great way to summarize what we've been talking about here today. And I would like to thank all of our speakers for their contributions and for sharing your insights on the way that we can navigate the systems, the way that the systems might incentivize us to go one way or another, but also then we are already teasing some tools that we can use to navigate them. So thank you very much to everyone for joining us. At this stage, I would like to just again wrap up and say thank you to all of our attendees also joining us here today. We have today, of course, discussed systems thinking as an approach as part of anticipatory leadership, but we will continue our discussions also next week, where we'll be focusing on futures thinking tools. So Victor shared some tools, and Ebenezer and Jared also shared some tools that you can keep in mind. We'll continue exploring these next week and how we then later can apply them as well within our different systems. So with that being said, you can scan the QR code here on the screen if you haven't signed up for the next webinar already. You can also find there the sign-up links to all of our webinars for this webinar series. With that, I would like to thank you all and wish you a good rest of your day, or a good rest of your evening, or good night if you're joining us from New Zealand, Australia. And we hope to see you again next week. Thank you all so much.